ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Lore Week. I guess this isn't Lore Week, is it? Oh, I need to put something up, don't I? Hang on just a second. While we wait here for a moment to get started proper-like. Do I have it on this? No, of course I don't. That's okay, I can pull it up really quick. Give me one moment. So for those of you not aware, we have a voot. It's a very important voot. It's a voot. We have a big important voot going on right now for this very feature. The one that you are looking at right now. So make sure you voot, please. If you have not vooted, then you should. And if you don't, then you will be destroyed. Horribly. So keep that in mind. If it's okay with you being destroyed, I mean, that's up to you, okay? I don't want to hold it against you. Now, I'm going to give it a minute for people to stream in, so to speak. But on the off chance you don't know what that voot is for, I'll go and tell you, that voot is for when we do these. Because it occurred to me we have another opportunity, another time frame that we could do these streams, the Streaminations. And that is basically right after Lore Week in the mornings. So, Lore Week starts at 10. We talk, we ramble for an hour to 2 hours. That's pretty much the average. And then we'd probably pop off for about half an hour. Watch the stream. There's another addendum to that. We'll get to that in a second. But either way, there'd be like a half an hour break, and then the Streamination would start. Okay? Now, vote. Have your voice be heard. That's the important part. I want to talk about that other thing. So I know that there are methods by which to sync things. What in the world is my stream doing? I've been looking into it. I found a couple programs for things like YouTube, but that's obviously not very helpful under these circumstances. And I don't know how to do the timing thing, so I could kind of look into it. If you don't know what I'm talking about, the idea is... So obviously I can't just stream the show. If I could just stream the show, my job would suddenly just become so much better. You have no idea. It would be just like, oh, thank God. Because I could just do that for everything from this point onward. I could just stream, the TNG, I could just stream Deep Space Nine, and I could just stream My Little Pony, and just talk about it as the episode happens. But that's not allowed, for reasons that, as weird as this may sound, are actually questionable. I know you'd think, wasn't that incredibly illegal? Yeah, but I'm not sure it should be. As weird as that probably sounds. And I know what you're thinking. Well, but Lore, we didn't pay for this. I want you to imagine something for a moment, okay? Can you put this into your minds? I want you to imagine that we all live near each other. And every Sunday evening, we get together, and I pop in the DVD of My Little Pony, or whatever, and we watch the episode and talk about it right then and there, in my living room. Now, I know that digital is not the same as physical, but that would literally be what I'd be doing with the Streaminations at that point. Because it would just be stream, chat, me, and we'd just be talking about it live. I do own this series. I can prove it. So, I have the DVDs at this point, just to make sure I can really prove that I own this series. Just in case it becomes an issue, but whatever. Whatever. Anyways, I just wanted to rant about that, but I've been kind of looking into the timing thing. I have to be honest, I don't really have a good way to do that. And I'm not, as weird as this may sound, I'm not even sure that's a good idea. Because at that point, that's really relying on a lot of extra steps to basically add something that won't really be the same format at all. So for the moment, I'm content with you guys either are familiar with the episode, are familiar with the show, or are sufficiently familiar with, have just rewatched it, just like I did. I just finished rewatching it. So, excellent Colin Palooza. That is exactly what I wanted. So I just wanted to talk about that really quick. The vote, make sure you vote, and the riff tracks idea, the timing idea, which I don't have a lot of good options for. Now, so this episode, so a lot of these Season 1 episodes are going to be doing what I call introducing concepts, which is something that's really big when it comes to the beginning parts of a TV show. Any good TV show, which has a degree of planning put into it, will actually go out of its way to try and deliberately establish additional concepts with each additional point, with each additional episode that comes out in the first season. Now, I point that out that way because if you've ever watched TNG Season 1, you know that they didn't do that. Like, there were a few episodes that introduced new things, but not as many as there should be. They messed that up a little bit. But here, so we establish Big Macintosh. This is the first time we've really seen him. He was mentioned earlier, back in the first episode, but now it's like, hey, here's Big Macintosh. And the first thing he says is, of course, yep. And then he starts talking, because they hadn't actually established that point yet. That's a separate problem. That's called early installment weirdness, when they haven't actually decided yet how they want things to go. So now this episode, yeah, I know someone who can do the yep really well, Bragman, and the nope, I can't do it. I don't have the tone for it. My voice isn't deep enough, and I don't have the drawl going on. So even more so than the previous episode, this is very much a lesson episode. Trying to be like, hey, so here's the lesson of the episode. And in this case, it's actually 2 episodes, which I do kind of, 2 lessons. Excuse me, I am tired. God, I'm going to go to bed like right after this. 2 lessons in one, which I'm okay with the second one. The first one's kind of rote, though. The first one is fairly simple. Don't commit to more than you can do. Look, I know you could say that's directly applicable to me. Shut up. Point being, that's the first lesson. Second lesson is there's no shame in asking for help. Now, I actually like that. I like that lesson. That's a good lesson for people to learn in general, I think, and is the kind of thing that I really approve of my niece learning going forward, because there's no shame in asking for help, especially if you need it. And it's worth noting that Applejack very definitely needed help here. By the way, hi, Bregman. It's good to have you for this. Where have you been? Okay, so question time for the 5 of you who are here today. Do you think Ponyville was in legitimate threat from the stampede of the cattle? This is actually important, because either way, we've got to talk about something. Mulgore music. Well, you say that, Shikor, but we'll get to that. Don't worry. Because let me go ahead and address some of my points here. So first of all, if the answer is yes, and I mean a real life cattle stampede is actually a pretty serious issue. I retain my statement to this day that the most terrifying part of Lion King is when the stampede starts and they do a wonderful shot of the stampede swarm, just wave of creatures coming down. It's just absolutely nightmarish. Anyways, I've actually seen a stampede once in real life. I was quite a distance from it, but I still felt it. Anyways, so yeah, no, it's entirely possible that they would have actually been threatening to them. Now, the problem there is that stampede of cattle, if they were actually a threat, that brings up the question of how and why. Like, I know they were scared because they saw a snake, and that's part of the joke, but these are cows who can talk, who are sentient and sapient, as I like to say. So they... I mean, imagine if a whole bunch of people just ran through another town of people. Right? Huh? Really? Now, I don't actually think they were a legitimate threat, because I think the second part is more likely, that they were not a legitimate threat, but that Ponyville... How do I phrase this? Good way to put that, Spinobi. Thank you for putting words into my mouth. Thank you very much, Spinobi. Much obliged as always, sir. Now, you probably know the question, so where would you like to put that? Oh, God, Praguin. Anyways, so instead of... Obviously, Ponyville, they don't have any experience with how bad can get, basically. And that's a good thing, right? Like, that's an actual good thing. The idea being that the Ponyville shouldn't have to know how bad gets. Later on in the episode, they get a herd of rabbits, and they're like, oh God, it's so horrible, right? So the idea here being that this is something that is threatening to them, but not really. Not actually threatening, you know? Now, that being stated, this... Well, see, the problem is this brings up a very serious issue. The cows are sentient and sapient. Now, in case you got it, Spinomi, give me 1 second. In case you're not really getting this, in case I'm not explaining this properly. Yeah, exactly, Bragon. That's kind of the thought I was thinking. In case I'm not explaining this properly, they are basically treated as if they are cattle. You know, they're herded. They guide the stampede. Everyone's like, oh my gosh, incoming. But they could talk and chat, and they just walk back all normal-like. I mean, you see the problem? Okay, now I'm going to go ahead and talk about this briefly. This is, I think, one of the biggest problems with Season 1 of My Little Pony. It doesn't do a whole lot of intelligent world building. There is some world building there, but it doesn't do what I call intelligent world building. Now, I'm going to say something that's going to sound very unkind, but it's going to go ahead and it'll make sense, especially for those of you who have watched Star Trek. It's kind of like Season 1 of TNG or early TOS world building. It's there, and they are establishing a world, but they're not thinking about it. They're just throwing ideas out there, that is kind of developing a background without regard to the other ideas being thrown out there, developing the background. And what you get is this hodgepodge of, There's a reason why so many theory crafters, when it comes to Star Trek, just literally mentally eject entire episodes from continuity because they are so contradictory to the design of the world, right? Now, this isn't as bad of an example as that. But I do feel that a lot of Season 1 of MLP does exactly this. They develop a world without having actually thought it through in advance. This is something that will definitely be fixed in the future. I can think of several episodes going forward where they have a lot more actual thought and focus on doing a coordinated series of world building across episodes. But anyways, that's just my theory on this one. I don't actually know. The alternative is, of course, that these cows are basically substandard people, one way or the other. Disposable people, I think, is the preferred term for that. Now, given the whole, idyllic thing, I can't believe that they're actually intended to be dehumanized or intended to be slaves. But that's kind of the point, isn't it? They clearly didn't think this through, and now we have unfortunate implications. So one way or another, this is a mess. Sorry for talking about this so long, but it's the biggest thing that the episode left me with. It's just like the first 2 minutes. It's literally done as a setup for the main plot. They also do, so this is actually something kind of weird. In contrast to the bad storytelling I just talked about, they do have a bit of good storytelling. Yeah, no kidding, Detective Rarity. Goats will be portrayed kind of negatively in the future. Oh yeah, speaking of which, really quick, while we're on the subject, I'm actually surprised they decided to make cows people. Now, I know that sounds like a strange statement, but as we see going forward, and as will be established many times, there's a pretty big divide in between sentient and sapient beings and animals. There's literally a scene where, Fluttershy feeds a fish to someone in the future, right? So fish are edible. There are carnivores. There are bears. They can understand English, but they are not portrayed as if they are fully sentient and sapient. Now, the fact that they can communicate, despite the fact that they aren't portrayed as sentient and sapient, just makes things even more complex than they already were. We'll get there when we get there. That's going to come up, especially when we get to the pet episode. I mean, how do you have... Moving on. It could have been... No, Zachariah, no. Arguably, there is no religion in this show, which actually I'm kind of in favor of. Not because I'm anti-religion, but because I think that's something they probably shouldn't tackle in this kind of a show. Anyways, so then they have a bit of quick and dirty exposition, which I wanted to point out really quick. I haven't seen her all week. Yeah, not since the Stampede. It's a very natural conversation point to just be tossed in there. And it helps to establish for the audience that in between the little scene cuts, it has been a week. We didn't need that, but it was a nice way to just kind of have a quick and dirty in there. This, of course, leads to a really small point. Now, I've actually seen this before, but this is the first episode I really noticed it in. The animation, as I've said many times, is actually excellent in this show, even early on, even in Season 1. But one of the things that's really, really cool is the manes, like, flow and bob as they move. Like, if someone turns their head quickly, the mane will go boonk like that. Or if they kind of go, it'll kind of go... It's really minor stuff, and from what I understand, they actually had a computer program to simulate physics, to basically generate a physics engine on the hair and the tails and all that. So they could just simulate. It's just good stuff. It's really tiny stuff that adds to the animation quality substantially, and I just wanted to comment on it very quickly. So, then we have to have what is basically the establishing point of the episode. Twilight gets up on stage. I agree, Ethel, absolutely. I mean, it is kind of physics. It is very top-tier animation. Yeah, I agree. The Twilight gets up there, and she's got a bajillion cue cards. Of course she does. And she keeps getting interrupted by people who are constantly gushing about the fact that Applejack's going to help them with something later on in the week. This is actually a surprisingly good little bit of storytelling. I know that sounds strange, but it's basically weaving in the elements of the plot rather naturally into an event that is specifically tied into the plot, but not directly. It's just a good way to get that information out there and give us an idea of what's coming up. This, of course, leads to another bit of a small point. The idea here is that Applejack has this huge job to do. Like, she has to go and get all the apples from Samurai Jack's yard. And Samurai Jack has so many apples, it's ridiculous. And so she's tired, she's exhausted. There's this huge job. I've got to get 52 YouTube videos done this week. I mean, apples bucked this week. Let's just say I have a lot of sympathy for Applejack in this episode. Now, of course, she's a cartoon, so rather than just being, someone who's barely struggling on, she actually gets to the point of not being able to hear correctly, not being able to move correctly. But I do sympathize with her a lot. I actually imagine a lot of you out there have had 1 or 2 or 8 or 50 weeks where you've had to really push way too hard. Yeah. At least a few hundred, Lord Harrimont, but I don't know, honestly. We do know they export quite a bit. Hey, SJ. Yeah, there's also the capital, which is just one train ride away, and we know that there's quite a few areas nearby, too. I don't have a map in front of me, but there are official maps. So, actually, at the time, Colin Peluso was actually something like 136, I want to say. But anyways, that's all done. We're done with that. Yeah, based on what I've seen, I agree with Detective Rarity. It feels like a small city, not a town. They don't show it off as well as every time they do a distance shot, it looks like a town square. Not even a town, just a town square. But as the show goes on and as we see more areas, more buildings, more aisles, more avenues, it gets across the idea that this is actually a small city. And that's how I've kind of mentally associated with it ever since. Basically, they've got a little bit of the SNES RPG effect going on. Anywho, so I have a note here that says she's so exhausted she can barely function. Cough, cough. Yeah, I don't know what that's like. Yeah, exactly, Zachariah. See? I'm sorry, I am exhausted right now, if it's not obvious. I am basically going to crash right after this, but I'm gonna power through this. I'm going to do it, by God! I don't need no help. Twilight offers to help. First time. Now, and what I kind of find amusing, there is there's a very small bit of exposition that's tossed out there, which is actually a nice little tidbit. Twilight says, why don't the rest of your family help? And Applejack says, oh no, they don't live here. They were just visiting for the event. That's good to put that in there, because otherwise, if you're thinking about it, remember watching the show for the first time, you might assume that there's this huge Apple family. And there is, but they don't all live here. Only the 4 live here. So, it's good to get that information out relatively early. In fact, if you're paying attention, we've only barely met Granny Smith. This is our first actual introduction to Big Mac. We haven't even met... Oh God, what's her name? The kid. She had like 2 lines of dialogue in the first episode. Applebloom, thank you. Applebloom. So we haven't even really met Applebloom yet. That's about it. That's all we've gotten. But because of the fact that this exposition is given here, we now have the understanding that it's just the 4 of them, and at the moment, with Big Mac out of commission, it's just the 1 of them. So that's good. That's good information to toss out there up front. So Twilight offers to help. This then leads to something that will actually become a part of Applejack's character several times. Is that a challenge? No, I'm just offering to help. You can't do this by yourself. Oh, yeah? Applejack very definitely has the competitive spirit kind of a thing going on for her. And this is the first time that's established, really. You could argue that that was established when she arm wrestled Rainbow Dash for the ticket last episode, but I think this is a more clear establishment of that mentality and where that's going to go in the future. So, Rainbow Dash is the first one she helps. Now, Rainbow Dash is, of course, still fairly self-centered. This is something that's going to take her a couple of seasons to really grow out of. So Rainbow Dash is like, yeah, no, everything's fine. It doesn't notice anything at all. Savacom mentioned a theory. I was actually hoping she was here for this because I wanted to talk about this. That none of the main 6 are friends right now. Obviously, Twilight isn't friends with anybody yet. But the idea being that none of them are really what you would call real friends yet. They're more like buds or acquaintances or whatever. And the more I rewatch Season 1, the more I'm thinking that's actually true. Rainbow Dash and...
Welcome. Pay close attention. Hopefully you'll learn something.
Rainbow Dash and Pinkie Pie and Fluttershy all don't notice anything is going on. The only reason Twilight notices is because she's dealing with the fallout of all the screw-ups. You know? It's from Nova Knight. Ow. Thank you very much, Nova Knight. Much obliged. Much appreciate. Thank you again. And I'm going to go ahead and jot that down really quick here. For Mega Man. What's the voot? Well, if someone will link you the voot, because I don't actually have a link handy right now. I do agree with what Zachariah said, though. Fluttershy and Rainbow Dash are definitely closer friends, because the 2 of them have been friends since kids. But I think that is kind of it, of the various groups. Excuse me. Yeah, classmate friends is not a bad way to put that. I mean, how many of you had friends in a particular class in school, and then the next year came around and you never heard from them again? Anyways, it's, by the way, none of this is a complaint. This makes sense, and in fact, I would even go so far as to say this is a good thing. They shouldn't just be super close friends right off the bat. They should build into that. Anywho, so Rainbow Dash has no idea what's going on and obviously gets crashed into the thing. So Twilight makes another attempt to help Applejack. Now this one specifically pricks Applejack's pride. This then leads to her stubbornness. Now this is interesting because I have a weird feeling that if Twilight was a better people person, she'd be able to convince Applejack to accept help earlier on. Instead, she just walks up and says the obvious. Right? Like, hi, you need help. You're failing. That's not a very diplomatic way of doing that, is it? And so obviously Applejack takes offense to that and starts getting stubborn. She starts digging her heels in. I don't need help. I can do this by myself. Now, I'm not trying to say that Applejack is, of course, in the right here. But if you think about it, her perspective is very understandable here. If someone just walked up to you and said, hey, you suck, I'm going to go help you. There's actually, I mean, you could probably understand what the whole, no, I don't need help. Right? Anyways. This then leads to the introduction of two characters that I actually really like on this show, Mr. and Mrs. Cake. They're definitely, third-tier characters, but pretty much every time they show up, I like it. So that's kind of awesome to see them. And I agree, by the way, Shikor. Applejack can't really be honest with herself. This is not the last time that'll be a problem. So, Mr. and Mrs. Cake are introduced, and Pinky's going to be watching the shop, and okay, we're all good. And this then leads to what I like to call dream logic. You ever had dream logic? Of course you have. Some people call this drunk logic, but I prefer dream logic because in a dream, it's like, this makes perfect sense. And if you were to think about it afterwards, you're like, wow, that was really stupid. So what we see is full-on dream logic. Okay, I did too, Ethel. Okay, I need to we're making muffins. So what are our ingredients? And I wrote all of them down just to make sure I didn't forget. Frickin', haha, Spinovi. It's potato chips, soda, lemon juice, and worms. Now, the worms is the obvious one, but why, Detective Rarity? Why would anyone do that? I mean, without the worms, at least it would be something. Actually, I want to know how these things turned into, like, muffins at all. There's no flour involved. Just... Ugh. Now, of course, the reason I specifically called this out for dream logic is as she's talking about it, she justifies it. That's going to be awful salty. Oh, soda! That's a good idea. That'll definitely moisten up the chips. I could just see someone in a dream thinking that, oh, that makes perfect sense. You gotta make the chips moist, right? Otherwise they're just gonna be... Yeah, well, Spike eats gemstones. Although we haven't really seen that yet. So, lots and lots and lots of people get sick. Also, I have a note in my notes here that literally just says, ew, 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 ew. And I stand by that note. As a quick aside, by the way, you could tell this is a little bit of early establishment or early installment weirdness, because in later seasons and episodes, Pinkie Pie would probably have no problem eating these things. She has like a cast iron stomach. It's actually a character trait of hers. It actually becomes a plot point way later when they first meet Twilight Sparkle, which is like season 5, I think, or something like that. So... Actually, fun little fact, Detective Rarity. Even if you, a human being, were to eat a muffin, which was made with chips, soda, lemon juice, and worms, there's nothing in there that'll actually give you food poisoning. Weirdly enough. Might taste pretty gross. Yeah, Starlight Glimmer is who I meant. What did I say? I have to be honest, I do get the names mixed up sometimes. I get names mixed up in general. What do you want from me? I said Twilight Sparkle. God damn it. I'm as bad as that stupid dragon. So yes, when they meet Starlight Glimmer, excuse me. God. Moving on. So, Twilight reaches out to her again. It's like, hey, look, this is not cool, Applejack. Applejack gets even more and just angry and furious about this whole thing. No! I don't need help. Now, excuse me, I'm going to go help Fluttershy. This is, of course, the first part of the lesson really coming in. You know, the idea of she bit off more than she could chew. Because if she was just doing the Applebucking thing, that's bad enough by itself, but she's insisting that she cannot be perceived as anything less than the best, most reliable, dependable pony. After all, her friends are counting on her. That's what she does. That's what she's good at, damn it. And being honest for a second, if there was something you were known for that you couldn't do, wouldn't that bug the hell out of you? Like, to use a direct example, let's say someone asked me to comment on a game. Like, you're the lore dude, give us lore about this game. And I looked at it like, So once again, you can kind of see where Applejack's coming from on this. This leads to the bunny stampede. I commented on the good animation earlier. I want to comment on the good camera work, too. So, like, there's a surprisingly large amount of really good camera work in the show in general, but this episode does it in particular. And they show a lot of angles. They show a lot of motion. There's not a lot of I can't remember what it's called, like the static camera problem, where here's a shot. The Flintstones problem. Here's a shot. Switch over here. Switch back here. Right? I mean, not to bash on Flintstones, but the camera use in Flintstones was incredibly threadbare. And yeah, I've seen it in a lot of animation shows where they have the problem of really static shots almost constantly. But here the camera's far more dynamic. They have no problem, I'll give you a direct example, they have no problem having a camera here looking straight down and pulling up as the bunny stampede is going by. You know, just little stuff like that. So, after the bunny stampede, possibly Nova Night? I don't actually know. I really don't. But again, this is not the first or last time I will comment on the good camera work. I love good camera work. It's a big thing for me. It's funny to me that the bunnies might actually be more damaging than the cows if you think about it for a second. But anyways, and of course this all leads to a big mess and a massive alliteration attack. But no, it's okay. It's okay, guys. She did it. She took out all the apples. She's done. Oh, wait, she only took out half the orchard. That's just got to be the worst feeling. I did it. I managed it all by myself. No, you didn't. Oh, clonk. Really feeling for Applejack here, even though she's kind of the villain of this particular episode. So, this then leads to the lesson where they spell out everything I've already told you about it. Which also, by the way, you know how I mentioned the whole early, they weren't really thinking about the world building thing? So, in this episode, Twilight Sparkle reaches out and pulls the apples off of, like, a 20 or so tree simultaneously, and then puts the apples over here. Now, if you're not catching that, based on how the show will later present the general telekinetic abilities of unicorns in general, that's huge, what she just did there, because it requires a lot of precision, and because it requires a lot of scale. The 2 points of difficulty when it comes to the magical telekinesis thing that they do. It's actually mentioned, I'm not even making this up, this is actually mentioned, that every unicorn, to some extent or another, has at least a little bit of telekinesis, but it's usually very weak. Usually their magic only comes through and really establishes itself in specific regard to whatever their cutie mark is, their point in the pattern. So, you know... The idea that Twilight Sparkle can just do something that large scale is something that's basically going to be retconned later on. Later on, she's going to have a much harder time lifting smaller things and having less precision. Just another compliment about that. Twilight Sparkle's thing is magic, and she can do magic better than basically everyone else, but I'm just pointing it out. Anyways, I don't remember anything about a bet between Applejack and Big Mac. I could be wrong. It wouldn't surprise... Oh! No, you're right! It did! Whoever failed the bet was going to have to wear Grandma Smith's girdle down squares or town square, something like that. I actually forgot about that. I just watched that episode last week too. Oh, geez, Bragwin, that sounds terrible. Anyways, so then the episode comes to a close, and this is another thing that some of the episodes have. I'm going to go and admit something. I hate the... I don't know what the proper term is for it. I think of it as the Star Trek TOS ending. So, for those of you... I keep paralleling this to Star Trek. What the hell do you want from me? If you've actually watched the original series, you know a huge number of the episodes have to end on basically a joke or like some kind of light moment. And almost always there's a laugh. Cut to credits. Cut to credits, right? I hate that crap. Yeah, the sitcom thing. I hate that. That aggravates the crap out of me. TNG did that early on, and then thankfully got away from that. TNG did it later on as well. But anyways, this episode has that. Here, have this delicious thing. Ew, Spike. No, what? They're great. Hate that crap. Thankfully, MLP doesn't always do that. And again, they will kind of come out of that too. Anyways, so let's talk about a couple things. First of all, will the MLP videos be uploaded to YouTube? The answer is yes. That's not going to start at least probably until next week. I haven't decided exactly how we're going to do that yet. I haven't even decided which channel they're going to go live on. But, you know, it is going to happen. I do have the local VODs. They're ready to go. Now, Weouds just mentioned something. Some say that Big Mac got hurt because of the bet. That's actually interesting. So I had a personal headcanon theory that's pretty much the exact opposite of that. I had the headcanon theory that he got injured basically to avoid the bet. To avoid having to do it, since, you know... I don't know, though. It's worth... If he actually got injured doing that, that would probably mean he got injured trying to put on the girdle, not actually walking in it. So I can just picture that. Hang on, let me just put this... Then again, we know Big Macintosh has no problem wearing women's clothing, so... Oh yeah, we'll get to that episode, too. Actually, I guess I should say those episodes. She shows up several times, doesn't he? Anyways. He tripped in his... He was so excited to put on that girdle. Not really, Detective Rarity, but it's worth noting that I don't know a lot about legitimate autism. I only usually know about it as the form of insult. I do know of certain highlights and signs of autism, but from what I understand, given the levels of severity that can vary there, if she is autistic, it's probably really on the light side of things. If I was to say Twilight Sparkle has any actual mental issues, I would say it's anxiety. Not, you know, how you normally think of when you think of the word anxiety, but like legitimate anxiety attacks anxiety. I don't know if that's intentional. It is worth noting that, you know, especially early on, they were just trying to make a kids show, but that would be my opinion on that one. Sorry, I was just thinking it over in my head. I'm not sure. I also haven't seen anything past, I think, season 6 or season 5. I don't remember. Somewhere in there. So there's at least 2 seasons of stuff that they could have done something with that I don't know about. So maybe they actually confirm it later on. I don't know. I haven't even seen the finale, which came out last week. Either way, that's actually all I got for this episode. So I'm going to go ahead... I'm going to go to bed. I am exhausted. I've been working so much. I'm going to check... Actually, you know what I'm going to do real quick? Before I chop it off, I'm going to check the vote. Yes, I do. I watch them right ahead of it, like minutes before I do the Streamination act. God, I can't pronounce anything. So we now have 108 people on the Voot, which is a lot. And it is swinging overwhelmingly towards the idea of doing this in the morning. Now, I'm going to leave this poll up all week. No, I don't, Shiko. I could do this by myself. Now, if you'll excuse me. So I'm going to leave this up all week, but this is probably definitive. So going forward, we are probably, like, unless literally 67 people suddenly vote for doing it at 8 p.m., we are probably going to go ahead and be doing this in the morning, Sunday mornings after Lore Week, starting next week. That's going to be the official time for that. I'm going to have to make a new graphic for the schedule down there and everything, but I can do that. That's not super hard. So, hi, Savacom. Yes, you missed everything. I even mentioned you. The time. So hang on. Let me chop off the local recording.